physics and engineering. My own education has been between mathematics, philosophy, and computer science, and most of my teaching experience is in different environments than those which I studied myself, such as now in the law school. As subtitle of this presentation, I chose Science Nonfiction for Lawyers of Today and Tomorrow, and I think many of the remarks that Virginia Dignam made earlier in this conference are also attempts to go to science nonfiction. Because I believe there is a very important role for law schools in letting their students have enough understanding of the realities of the technologies we are talking about. Science fiction can be very effective in creating false expectations of AI systems, both in the positive and the negative sense. But I also have to say, science fiction can be very effective in making some aspects of pervasive use of technologies tangible. For example, the post-Snowden dystopian series Person of Interest exaggerates, but also highlights the impacts of algorithmic surveillance and pervasive use of facial recognition technologies, as in reality now also formally recognized in the European Data Protection Board, when they called for a ban on the use of AI for automated recognition of human features in publicly accessible spaces earlier this week, as referenced by Katelijne Muller. It is true that some basic legal principles are on the line, like the move of the burden of proof in the use of so-called predictive technologies. We see this in the pervasive use of risk profiling systems, such as we see in the Kindertoeslagenaffaire. It is important that lawyers understand that the type of prediction these tools offer is not that of the oracles in Minority Report. And even more important to understand how such tools shift the lens and can tilt the power balances that the basic legal principles aim to protect. Similarly, it is very important to understand how the use of AI tools in court cases interacts with existing procedure. In a 2016 paper that appeared, it presented a tool that had been able to correctly predict court decisions in 79% of a set of cases that had served in the European Court of Human Rights. But this raises a lot of questions, because what does that mean, 79% correct? And what does prediction really mean in this case? And where in the process is the decision actually made? So if that tool was trained on text that was already gathered towards a certain decision, it's no wonder that decision is being predicted well. There is bias in the data there. Of course, judges make mistakes, and one could argue that machines can make more and more accurate calculations and therefore are likely to make less mistakes. This argument is often made by Professor Jaap van den Herik in such debates, and it works well indeed for formalized games like chess or Go, where there are clear winning conditions. But what in a court case is the standard of accuracy, and how do we distinguish how to distinguish when the prediction or decision was correct? What does it actually mean, a correct decision in a court? There are many more fundamental questions to be asked here, and I'm not saying that each lawyer or each computer scientist should be able to answer them. But at least I believe lawyers that will operate in the coming years will need to have an understanding that the AI used is implicitly transforming procedures, practices, and principles. And after the presentation of Peter, we may add that there's also the psychological side of how do we treat these systems? What's the psychological side of this? So there should be attention to AI in the law school, and there's always two sides of the topic of law and AI. On the one hand, we have the law as it applies to AI, like we see in the regulation that recently appeared. On the other hand, we have AI that is used in legal proceedings. So questions are raised of how should laws be transformed in the light of AI impacting and transforming our society? And on the other hand, how is the legal practice transformed by the use of AI tools? And this implies a fruitful interdisciplinary interaction between law and AI in education, both for law and computer science students. Indeed, what we can see in current discussions is the need to translate abstract normative principles into implementable requirements, but also the other way around, an understanding of what kind of legal requirements can actually be coded into AI systems by design, or are there fundamental limitations of what can be realized in these technologies? We have seen this in the discussion of discriminatory effects in profiling systems, such as the COMPAS recidivism scoring algorithm in the United States. There it was mathematically proven that it is impossible to repair the unequal distribution of false positive, false negative rates, while at the same time keeping the overall scoring fairly distributed. This was a mathematical result that is very important in what we can ask of systems to realize. Such necessary and fruitful interdisciplinary debates require translation skills. And again, while not everybody has to become an interdisciplinary interpreter, I think it is important that everyone gets a feeling that the different disciplines give us different but overlapping perspectives on the societal problems that we all care about. As a sort of proof of concept, Feline Hermans of LIACS and myself ran a coding workshop for our students in the Advanced Master of Law and Digital Technology. So these were law students undergoing a bit of computer science education. This was not necessarily related to AI, but I think it was relevant for everything I mentioned before. What the students indicated they hope to achieve, and what I think we achieved to a large part, was very interesting also for us to see that there is actually a desire and a need to have more understanding about the other disciplines. So the students indicated they thought they needed this to be able to talk to programmers in their future profession, to get a sense for the difficulty, I would say computational complexity of different types of programming tasks, to acquire some basic vocabulary, to know what a client in their future profession would talk about. And also very practical, what are the different platforms that are used for software development and what kind of processes do software developers follow? So that you also know if you develop a policy or regulation, that it actually fits with the practices. Another thing is to get a sense of open source. How can code actually be reused? To which extent is that possible? And how do you find code on platforms like GitHub? They wanted to learn how things work in practice, also as a motivation to learn more. It can be a bit daunting to start in something that you haven't been accustomed to, but once you've made your first steps, it can be very inviting to go further. And finally, they wanted to understand technology as a solution. Like, to which extent can we see technology as a solution? And going back to the science fiction, you may think that technology can solve everything, but or you may think that technology will ruin everything, but as students of law should know, it all depends, and there are different perspectives on that. So I think we should implement, yes, I'm a computer scientist, so I think about implementation. I think we should implement more interdisciplinary education around law and AI to create more awareness of the different disciplinary lenses, to make students aware of how the other people from other relevant disciplines approach the same problem differently and frame it differently, think differently about solutions, to develop translation skills to some extent, but maybe most importantly, to get a better understanding of possibilities and limitations of the solution that other disciplines may provide. So to close off, I'm not so fond of speaking about AI as a predictive technology, but I can agree that the best way to predict the future is to create it. So what I said about education in law and AI is not just ambition or education fiction. Within sales, we are actually already active, working on a lot of initiatives, both from the sales work group within the law school, together with LIACS, but also from the Central Education Board in the law school, the Central University Board, and also on the Leiden-Delft Erasmus collaboration level. So while we are creating it, I dare to predict that a lot is about to happen in educational law and AI in the coming year, and I hope to get many of you involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Francine, for this very, very nice presentation. I very much see this as a very, very need that we do need to take into account in the future. And I think that to prepare ourselves, like in both sides, no, like not only like on how to regulate, but also how we can use this as an opportunity. No, at the beginning of today's conference, we were hearing from Virginia also stressing how negative it was, this regulation. No, and many oftentimes we see this because of the lack of knowledge on what are the goods also of this technology. No. Francine, if it is okay with you, we're going to move now to the panel that we have. And then while we are going to be talking with our speakers, maybe we can at the same time like open the room for some questions also from the audience. But I want now to take the time to give a very warm welcome to our panelists that they came and then made the time also to be with us today. So in order to talk about exactly the very much needed question on how AI is going to change legal education and what are the tools and mechanisms that we need for future, we count with 4 speakers with us. We have Felix Zoff with us, who studied law in Vienna and joined in some years ago the Department of Innovation and Digitalization in Law of the University of Vienna as a research and teaching assistant. So thanks for coming. We also have Hadassah Drukar, who is currently a research assistant in our center at the Law for Digital Technologies at Leiden University, and that at the same time, she is the founder of the Law of Tech, which is an online platform specifically aimed at preparing the legal world of tomorrow and by educating about the interaction between the law and new technologies. Thank you, Hadassah, for coming today. And we also are joined by Karine Karaki, who I'm very happy to see. She's a former student from this course on law and AI that we had this year as a very brand new course in our house. And she's actually now a master's student in intellectual property and business law in Jean Moulin Lyon 3 with a focus on competition law and patents. But also she is the president of the European Law Students Association of Lyon. And also she's doing some internship in Adrian Paul. Then also, and to close the round of introductions, we also have Jan van Stalduinen. I hope that I pronounced your name correctly. Jan's might have one of the most interesting backgrounds in which he is both a computer science and bioinformatics student, but also a private law student at Leiden University. And he's about to graduate this summer. And well, he has been working a lot on medical liability related to the use of AI. And I think that these both backgrounds equip him also very well to answer some of these key questions. So to open up and to give you now the floor, I want to ask you, how do you think that AI is going to change the legal profession? Jan, you want to take the first go?
Yeah, you were talking to me, right? Yeah, certainly. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation to be here today. Yeah, I think as other people already mentioned today, it's important to be very realistic as to the possibility of AI and what it can and cannot do. So to try to do that, I would like to separate the implication of AI into, I think, so for one, it will change the way legal research will be done, in the sense that it will be easier to go through enormous amounts of documents and find legal arguments in sort of in the legal practice. But of course, also how in society people will behave and how societal relations will take place. And of course, in the end, that trickles down into legal rules. And I think it's important to separate those two, because they have a different effect on the legal education.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Karine, what about you?
Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to this conference. It's a great honor to be among you. So I think that today we can confidently say that artificial intelligence is changing the practice of law in unprecedented ways. And this is mostly because the legal institutions and the legal profession are not immune to the technological trends that have touched every single industry. So, for example, this is divided into two sections. First of all, the shift of the legal education within the student body, which is shown as there is significant implications for all law students who are now presented with different students from humanities and technology backgrounds, such as Jan, for example, and who are now learning from each other's expertise and ways of thinking. And on the other way, there is also a change within the law schools. So for example, the curriculum itself is adapting to new technologies, such as Leiden University, which has introduced the Law and AI course. And this is seen as by introducing, for example, mandatory or electives on AI. So this is, for example, seen for myself as I personally had gone through exchange semester. So much like others, I found the subject to be intriguing, intellectually challenging, because it does tie to law in ways that no other subject has before. And I think that in addition, having such a background can give an edge in students' professional careers and can even steer some direction in ways that we did not even think that was possible. And I think that today, law schools are giving a chance to collaborate closely with business students, computer science students, to design new technologies that will help solve previously unsolvable cases, such as predictive analytics, which are now used in courts, for example.
Yeah, Karine, I like very much this statement. Law schools are given now the chance to update themselves and to be part of this. No, what we see Leiden University, but also in Europe, there are not that many programs or courses, not even on law and artificial intelligence, but in law and new technologies. No. So the fact that now there is put so much attention into this arena, I also agree with you that this is a really nice opportunity that law schools are going to be confronted with this question on how do they take these? Are we then going to respond and go ahead, or on the contrary, we want to strengthen also our main pillars of the law? Because we also heard today that it could be also very nice to have disciplines that they can critically comment on each other. But I guess that for sure that may require also some knowledge about what the others are doing, right?
Exactly, because as was said before, I think that we should create change and not fear it. So I think that traditionally, in the traditional sense, most legal institutions and law schools are afraid of change. And most people do critic this quite a lot, not just from scholars, but students as well, saying that the legal education has to adapt to new technologies, to new trends that are evolving, because otherwise we're preparing this new set of graduates for jobs that have not existed before and that will not exist in the future. So I think this is really important to equip the youth of today, including myself and including others, with this set of tools that did not exist before. And I think that the legal education as a whole is trying to face the changes that are improving life as through artificial intelligence, and instead of being afraid of it and being a handicap to so many legal institutions.
Felix, I saw that you were agreeing with Karine in some points. Do you want to jump in?
Sure. I think that we have to kind of imagine technology or technological developments in different areas in the law curriculum. First, I think we have to understand what interdisciplinary really means. So from my perspective, it means that you open up legal education to other fields, maybe even through co-teaching. So you get people from other faculties like informatics, psychology, business, and so on into the law school and teaching in the law school certain subjects together with people with a legal background. Then you have to probably discuss what the role of technology in the curriculum is. So from my perspective, there is the need to have some kind of a fundamentals course on IT and technology and AI, because in the end, you need to have at least a basic understanding what is happening. It's probably similar. You cannot really say what a car accident is unless you have a basic understanding what a car is, because a car is some physical object. More or less everybody has a basic understanding what a car is, how it's functioning. Now with software and IT, we need more courses to introduce people to technological concepts, to give them a kind of a basic overview of what this R is and how it interacts. And if you then want to go more into depth, you can have elective courses teaching more on the subject. But I think we need to have a general better understanding for everybody. Just if a lawyer then encounters something in practice, he has a basic understanding of what is happening.
Yeah, and I imagine that then by welcoming other disciplines to be part of the discussions and the teaching curriculum at the School of Law, this would also already ask for these other disciplines to break down their fundamentals and their experiences and expertise to a level of understanding in which it can be also taken by legal scholars and future legal professions, no?
Definitely. It's similar in the other way around. So law for non-lawyers. So there's sometimes a course kind of introduction to law for non-lawyers, and it's the other way around. It's tech for lawyers or tech introduction for lawyers. Mm-hmm. And we probably as the lawyers are used to kind of teaching law to people who are non-lawyers, and now it's the other way around. People teach IT or psychology or business or whatever to lawyers, so people with non-background. And I think that's important to kind of speak the same language so that everybody understands what the other side is saying.
Can I just chime in, Eduard, on that point? Because I think it's I agree with everything that is said. Although I should warn. I think I want to warn that the core of the law curriculum is still reasoning about the law and applying it to facts, but also thinking about the rules and whether they should change or not. And I think that the law curriculum as it stands is already quite full at some law schools, I think, and it can be hard for teachers to put in all those additional courses. So I would want to question, are there certain other aspects? And I think Felix has some thoughts on this because he said something about it in his podcast that I listened to. But that if you want to put new courses in, then there are also things to take out. No.
Let's ask Hadassah 1 second because we haven't heard from her. Like Hadassah, in this discussion, what do you think first that it's going to change? We are talking about change and interdisciplinarity, but something like, are we saying that this is the only way to go? Like if something new comes in, then something needs to go?
So yeah, actually, I also want to say something similar actually as Jan about this curriculum, that I also think it's important to stress that there are some basics in legal education that definitely shouldn't go because they're really important for lawyers to really understand the basics of the law, how to reason. And this is actually also definitely something I discussed with Felix in an episode on my show. But what I do think also is important is to understand that the introduction of technology really isn't a separate aspect of the law. It really covers every single field of the law. So from criminal law to human rights law to corporate law, the whole span. And what I found interesting when I was in law school, and that was from 2017 to 2020, so not that long ago, what I found really interesting was to see that throughout my whole bachelor's program, I think the concept of technology and the influence that has on the law and the legal industry, any of the courses that I had. So I think that a basic point to start with perhaps is to introduce these topics in the courses that are given in law school. I think it's great if we could introduce separate courses on IT and separate courses on coding and on law and AI in itself. But when we're talking about corporate law, we could also address topics that, for example, Professor Weissman before indicated on, the influence of the AI Act in corporate law and how does that work with corporate boards? Because we discuss corporate boards extensively throughout corporate law. And I think that is a really basic point that we should at least address in regular education or legal education. And then we can also, of course, look at specific courses that might be less relevant or could be combined with other courses to make room for topics like law and AI and not just have it as a side course that somebody can elect as an elective because they're fundamental topics that we're supposed to address in our digital age, I think, at least.
Yeah, I guess that is also how we see it, not because we are familiar because of our work, but very much because of the pervasiveness of these technologies. We very much cannot escape having technology around us, and that very much shakes the world and also the foundations of our legal systems and our professions. And it is about time, no, to have some change. I think that Francine wanted to jump in. You can, Francine.
Yeah, so it was in response to Felix's intervention where you made the comparison with cars, but we also don't teach car mechanics in the curriculum. So I was wondering to which extent you think this is something that should be done, especially for lawyers, to create these basic knowledge for technology that fundamentally changes society. I would say like a car did, it fundamentally changed society. So to which extent do you think this is a task that is on the table for law schools, or would this be something for all of society, like reading, writing? And I see our colleague Mark Leiser write about statistics and numeracy. I'm very much on board that there should be more basic understanding of numbers for everybody. Okay, I'm a mathematician, but yeah, to which extent do you think that this attention for the technology should be in the legal curriculum, or should we work towards having a better general understanding, like reading, writing, calculating? Because yeah, there's many things that are very relevant for lawyers, but that we also don't educate. I'm very curious about this because, of course, working in the law school, being an education coordinator, I would love to arrange this within the curriculum, but I'm also very much want to echo what Jan and Hadassah just said. I also feel that a law education should, in the first place, teach the law-specific skills and knowledge, because that's what you come for.
Let's turn the question to our panelists. Karine, do you want to start giving your thoughts on the question?
Yes, of course. So I think I have quite a conflicting opinion on the subject because, well, I am a law student, and if I was so good at numbers, I wouldn't be a law student, let's say. And I think that there is this gradual importance to introduce the technology, IT, and analytics to the mandatory courses of law, but in a way that is not overwhelming, at least for a first year law student that will not adapt to something that they did not sign up for, let's say. So I think that there is this medium that should be found between introducing the mandatory courses and mandatory principles of AI and technology and robotics within the core elements of law, but also keeping this rhythm of the legal education to not confuse legal scholars or legal students as well. So I think there is this equilibrium to be found in a way, because otherwise I think that personally I would not be able to adapt to it with such ease because I don't have the background for it. So I think this has to be taken into consideration because, as we said before, interdisciplinary is such an important topic for us. And at law school, we do find students that are from different backgrounds, students who have done previously a bachelor in computer science, in biology, who already have those key concepts that can help them understand the notions a bit better. So I think something that is a bit quite easier to understand and implement is a necessity before trying to introduce harder notions of calculating and mathematics.
I guess what you also seem to point to is that we need somehow to think whether we want to have a quick fix and say, okay, what can we change here and there? And then we just like go ahead with this.
Yeah.
Or if in the contrary, we need a much more substantial change in which we rethink a little bit the way we've been presenting this in other countries. And I think that our colleague Mark Leiser is more familiar with this because he was in the US for so long. But in the US, for instance, you cannot go to law school before having an undergraduate as in another discipline, and that is what then somehow like makes also great lawyers, that they can work on patents because they have a physics background, and then they have the law. And even our director Bart Kosters have also a double background on this. I'm going to ask Felix, and then I'm going to give you the floor, Mark, because I see that you have raised your question. Felix, what do you think about Francine's question?
I think, first of all, you're right that law school should be about the law in primary. But what do lawyers? Lawyers apply the law to facts. But when you don't understand the facts, then you can't apply the law. So you need to enable law students as future lawyers to apply the facts. And if there are concepts that abstract like AI, they don't grasp in general the concept, then they can't apply the law. So I think it's about enabling students to apply the law. And that is kind of the minimum requirement, more or less, of law school to enable students. So I'm not sure about Leiden, but in Vienna, part of the kind of tax law part is also part of business law and accounting. So you have a general understanding of business and accounting to apply to tax law. So you better understand tax law. And it's similar like this. You're gonna need kind of, as a lawyer, you need to understand the world to apply the law to the world. And I think it's necessary to offer a course kind of introducing people to the basic concept of ITs and AI and so to better understand the world. And I think that's more or less sufficient then. There's no huge kind of program because then you can study IT.
Yeah, Mark, for those that do not know him, he is also a colleague in our center, and he is very much passionate about education. Mark, what are your thoughts on this? I see you also answering to Bart's comment in the chat.
Yeah, I think first of all, I got to say this has probably been my favorite panel so far of the day's events, and thanks to all the participants who've given a lot of insight and food for thought. My first comment in the chat was a little bit tongue in cheek in that we at one point we can teach people numbers and risk and statistics, but we need to know so much stuff in order to solve the problems of the day. But we can't do that. We only have a limited amount of time. And I think Bart Custer has hit the nail on the head here when he said that we need to figure out what those core skills are that you can apply. And then I think Felix's his last comment was completely 100% relevant, that we learn law applied to facts. And we need to have that skill set. What I find is very frustrating within our discipline at the moment, not our law school, but within our discipline, is that we have multiple different people who are talking about various different things, who are basing some of their premises on ill-founded understanding of things like risk, statistics. And so you can come to a problem from as I've grown older, I've probably become more of a utilitarian. It's like what benefits the most benefits everybody in the big picture. And I feel sometimes personally a little bit of a clash between other people that says, okay, well, there's 99 people that are going to benefit from this, but there's one person that isn't. And we're saying, okay, but 99% of the population are going to benefit from this. We have to do something to protect the 1%, but we can't bring it to a halt simply because we have a failure for a very small percentage of people. I feel that education sometimes we lack, or we failed, or we are very short at critical analysis. I say this coming from not only living in the US, but growing up in a common law system, which is at the extreme, which is Scotland. Scots law is common law, which is everything you look at through, well, it says this, but it really means that. And that's why I get a little bit perturbed about sometimes people talking about ethics being the basis of fundamental rights and ethics, because ethics has no weight in court. You know, the precedents and case law develops over a period of time. And if you're going to go to the European Court of Human Rights or the Court of Justice of the European Union and argue for that 1%, every judgment is going to be based upon preceding judgments. And so we need to have more emphasis, I think, in the core of our legal education on critical analysis. And too many times, and I think it's partly due to sometimes Central European legal systems use a civil system. And so if it's X, then you go to Y. It's kind of like mapping a grid. And then I've had even sort of Dutch professors say to me, not in this department, Bart, but say to me, but the law says this. And people from common law systems just sort of turning around and going, yeah, but it doesn't mean that. You can't actually read the words on the page and interpret it like for like. And I think when it comes to artificial intelligence, I think Karina's comment about it giving you a cutting edge advantage, I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I think what you have to do is take that critical analysis to apply it to a very complex problem, and then apply that critical analysis to the facts, as Felix said, is what is going to separate the future lawyer from the graduate. And I think that's what we have to focus on in legal education, is teaching the core skills of critical analysis and applying it to complex computational problems, and understanding the consequences of doing so will make the future lawyer the great lawyer. Thank you.
No, thanks for your intervention, Mark. Hadassah, there you go. No, I was wondering because you also have a particular idea when we got to meet each other, Hadassah, and you mentioned it already in the panel today, that how many little times you've heard the word technology, throughout your understanding. Do you, seeing like this 99 and 1%, like, or the benefit, do you think that the future of the School of Law would benefit the majority, or this more utilitarian approach that Mark is saying. Hadassah, what are your thoughts on this?
So I hope that my connection stays all right. I have heard parts here and part not. But I do remember that throughout me listening to this conversation, wanted to say that, also react to what Carine before said about, regarding the introduction of technology to the legal education program. We don't, register to law school or apply to law school for these reasons. But I think that we have to go back far more than that even, and look at what are we actually even applying to. Because I very much feel that looking at law school, we have this image in our head of where we want to end up and where we think that we're heading based on some assumptions that we have of the legal industry, which are very much outdated in a way. When we enter law school, from my experience at least, I very much feel that it has all been about getting this paper, this degree, going through the courses, not really stimulating this idea of like, oh, we should talk about these topics and these topics, address certain societal aspects that are due to technology, for example, occurring. But what I very much see is that we're trying to basically with law school very much achieve something that doesn't exist anymore. And so I think that, also agreeing with Mark in that regard, we kind of have to really start at the bottom, really redefine what do we really want to achieve with certain courses, with certain methods of learning. And I don't believe that means like totally transforming this whole curriculum that we have. I think, like we've already said a couple of times, some things will have to stay, and inevitably that also means that some things are going to have to change. But I think that it's very much like a mindset thing also. I remember entering law school and there was a lecturer who basically shut the doors, said no computers, no phones, this indicating let's go back to the good old days. But there are no good old days anymore. And we can even discuss whether, that's the right terminology. And I think that we really have to go back to the basics and understand, where do we want to go? What is this picture that we're moving to? And from there discuss, what should we implement into the curriculum in order to get students to move into the future in which they will have a place, actually.
Yeah, no, thank you for your thoughts on this, and because it's very much agree on the idea that when you sign up for the School of Law, I would never have imagined that I would end up working on law and robotics. I would never have imagined to be in the Netherlands living, for instance, no. So I think that it also very much opens up the opportunity also to say at the beginning of the School of Law how many more possibilities are out there, and then to somehow like already establish a sort of like roadmap, and the idea also that this roadmap can change dramatically. No, like I'm not sure like if Francine would ever have imagined a time ago to end up in a School of Law, maybe, but we are in a happy family, no, here somehow. So I think that Hadassah, I think it's a really great point about opening the avenues to our students and letting them also understand that there are many ways to go, that for our students, but also for our faculty, to bring back this idea of like having an educational setting that it is not only unidirectional, but that it also promotes this sort of discussion among us, no? So on the one hand, it is essential to learn certain basics that will equip us for the future, but also stimulating this critical understanding of what are these phenomena that are very much shaping how we are approaching education, no? Jan, you want to jump in?
Yeah, then perhaps I see you're looking at the clock. We might be near the end, but I think responding also to Professor Custer's question, I think the core of the legal education should be to learn the ability to discuss about the law and exactly at this interplay of what is ethics, what are the legal rules, which and the interplay between ethical systems and legal rules and how they apply in practice. And although not simply or applying rules, so to say, as Felix said, but also knowing and being able to discuss what are the why are the rules as they are, and should they be different for particular instances. And I think there should be more room in the legal education for debate and the training the ability to really discuss and think about why these rules are there.
And you know, like now with the discussion that it is going on the chat, it very much reminds me of the idea of the privacy by design and like how it needs to be a win-win solution. Like it seems that somehow it's like, oh yeah, it's very packed, but still I'm going to put more. Is this really the approach we want? Like, because like in a way, like it seems to me that it shouldn't be at the expense of, we should figure out how we can make it a win-win, how we can integrate it in a way that it sums up, that it is constructive and that it builds on what we have, but it adds another new take forward. And I think that the ones that are here that got the opportunity to be in data protection, and so it is very much that it's like not about giving up different rights when they are in a conflicting situation, but about being creative in how we can handle this in the future. No. One of the ways could be the proposal that Bart said, no, is that, well, we had, I don't know, Bart, if you want to jump in, but you say, well, other educations had one extra year because it was somehow required because it sort of like demanded, no? What do you think on this, Bart? Do you think that this could be a good way to go, maybe?
Well, some of you already mentioned that if we want to throw in more of these topics into the curriculum, that something else has to be taken out of the curriculum because, well, it's already full, right? But I think that we can reason about this in a broader scope and say, let's take as a starting point, what do we need to have a good qualified lawyer leaving university and being well prepared for the job that has to be done. And at some point we might say that maybe that we need more than is in the current curriculum without actually throwing some other parts out. And if that's the case, we have to admit to each other, I would say, that perhaps the curriculum has to be a bit longer. Now I see a lot of other good arguments that we can stay within the confines of a 3+1 year curriculum, of course, in which we say we can integrate this into the courses. I think that Hadassah already mentioned that. But if we conclude at some point that there is too much to teach for a lawyer leaving university and getting started in the job market, then at some point we should conclude maybe that 4 years is not the exact timing that we should aim at, but we should perhaps prolong that. That has been done for other education programs in other fields. And well, at some point you might argue that this is necessary. I'm not saying it's necessary now, but it might at some point be open for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Bart. Looking at the time, I would like to once again thank you, the speakers, to make the time for coming today. And if I may wrap up a little bit about what I hear from you, especially you that you've been in the education, or you are still in the education. It seems to me that it's somehow like both ways. We cannot disregard the fact that technology is everywhere, and this affects society in multiple ways, and also our lives, which somehow leads to the idea that maybe some general understanding about how technology affects us also at the School of Law might have to be implemented in a much more apparent way. But then at the same time, that not everyone needs to be a technology lawyer, or not everyone needs to be a specialist in that, and that maybe we could also think about having the strategies in which then those students that they want to pursue a future career in this, they are well equipped also at the very beginning. No, so if we have like this 3+2, having some sort of solutions in this like 2 model that could be maybe desirable. For sure, it's good that as we were saying, that the fundamentals are the human dignity and how we need to be the moral subjects. and not objects. I think that it's so great that we took a step forward into this direction, and we could count on the brilliant opportunity to have the very same students that they are going to be part of this future. So thank you so much for everyone. And I'm going to give the floor to Bart to wrap this conference.
Yeah, thank you, Eduard. Well, I'm going to wrap up, but I'll certainly keep this short because I realize that I'm the last person standing between you and your weekend. Well, first of all, let me apologize that we couldn't offer you any drinks because we had to do this online. I hope that next time we will be able to do so, but at least I think we offered you some food, that is food for thought. And I hope that the presentations and the panels and the discussions that we had today provided you with further insights in the developments and some critical thinking about this. Personally, I found this very interesting and enjoyable. And perhaps at some points there are more questions than answers. I'm not sure about that, but I guess that means that there is more to be done, more research, more debate is needed on these topics. Well, I guess that's for next time. For now, I would like to thank our keynote speaker and all the other speakers and panelists for all their contributions. And I would also like to especially thank the organizers of this event. So that is Hadassah, that's Eduard, that's Iris, Anne. Thank you for making this work. I think you composed a great program and we had a very interesting afternoon like this. So furthermore, I would like to thank you all for joining this event and your active participation. And I guess have a great weekend and see you all at our next event.